Well, welcome back to our discussion from here at the Raven Precision Agricultural Center. A great space moving indoors since it got a little cool and rainy outside. When you look at some of the demand changes that we saw in USDA's report, looking at exports, but here domestically, there's a lot of excitement when it comes to renewable diesel. Have we seen renewable diesel pick up and that demand come on slower than what was expected?
Yep, well, I think so, at least according to the USDA reports and the crush reports that have been coming out in the latest couple monthly reports. I mean, yeah, we are seeing a trend of increasing crush domestically for soybeans for the renewable diesel market. But there's this expectation that we're going to potentially see another 700,000 bushels per day of crush capacity in the U.S. And if that materializes, we can certainly see crush in the United States, be maybe above 3 billion bushels. And right now we're still around 2,300 or 2.3 billion bushels, according to the USDA. So if we see that higher crush and domestic demand for that renewable diesel market, that's certainly going to put pressure up on prices and demand and bring down that stocks to use level to very tight levels.
Do you think that's realistic for the 2024 growing season?
It really depends on if these expansion projects are on time, when they can get those beans, if they can source them, if they can get the work staff and everything in line to start crushing those later in this year, then I think that's potentially a possibility.
Well, we've been talking about, Sarah, some of the cover crops that may be able to be used in some of these renewable diesel facilities and looking at that as a potential crop. But when you look at cover crops, are we seeing some of those conservation practices enter into the discussion of the Farm Bill?
Yes, there's been unprecedented level of federal spending on some of these programs. So we saw the Inflation Reduction Act with allocations for cover crops. We saw some pandemic spending directed towards crop insurance programs, funding cover crop planting. And we've also seen the Climate Smart Commodities Program, which is a huge level of spending to support not only cover crops, but other agriculture practices that sequester greenhouse gases. So there's a lot of opportunities for farmers, but there's also, we need more opportunities. So part of my research, we're working on designing a policy program to support cover crop adoption at the farm level, because when we look at the literature, the proof of the yield and economic benefits long-term for cover crops is just not there yet when we look at cover crops widespread across the U.S. as a general policy. So working to think about that and assist farmers through those challenging first few years of adoption to reaching those more profitable levels with cover crops.
Joe, talking about challenges, when you look at the economy, I mean, there was this thought that we were going to see, we've talked about a recession now for 2 years, and that it's imminent, it's coming. We haven't really seen that take hold. Have you been impressed with the U.S. economy?
That's one way to think about it, right? So output, as we measure it, is above what we think of as potential. Kind of think about a counterfactual, where we would be if all was right with the world. And our output is slightly above that. As we all know, labor markets are very tight. So the economy seems to be defying this higher interest rate environment. There's a somewhat more contrarian view here, though, I think we might consider, and that is maybe interest rates aren't high enough and they haven't been high enough for long enough. So, we can think the economy is sort of beating back the higher interest rate environment, or we can consider the fact that maybe the central bank and bond markets in general have more to do. Because again, interest rates, I think we have to be very careful when we look back 5 or 6 or 7 or any number of years before 2008 and treat that period as normal, because nothing has been normal since 2008. And so there was a much higher interest rate environment before that. And I would offer the proposition, perhaps somewhat unpopular proposition, that maybe a higher for longer interest rate environment is what we will ultimately see. In that environment, I think economic activity may be suppressed at some point, but we might not be at the point of suppression.
Well, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. All right, we need to take another quick break, and then we'll have much more from U.S. Farm Report this weekend.